Greetings, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast. As always, I am your host, Keith Billick, and I'm really happy to have you joining me. And we're coming up on that most wonderful time of the year. And no, I'm not talking about any holidays or anything like that. I'm talking about the annual all-listener VIP lounge. That's happening tomorrow. Hopefully you are hearing this in time. Tomorrow being December 21st, that's a Thursday, at 8 p.m. And for those of you scratching your heads, what is this VIP lounge? This is a video meetup that we do monthly for all the VIP listeners, the very important pickers. Typically, you have to be a Patreon subscriber to join in on those, but every December, I decide to open up that month's VIP lounge to all listeners. So anybody who is hearing this, head over to patreon.com/banjopodcast to get your meeting link. That's through Google Meet. And we'll be hanging out starting at 8 o'clock on Thursday. So please join us, see what all the fuss is about. Now, like I said, we actually do that every month, but it's typically restricted to my generous and supremely beautiful and talented VIP supporters. And today's VIP supporter of the show is Companion Custom Banjos. That is a Michigan-based company. Chris and Stephanie Sorensen and team, thank you so much for your generous support of the show. And anybody looking to get in on the custom banjo game, please check out the Companion Custom Banjo site and see what they are all about. They're doing great work. And like I said, based right here in Michigan. So I'm very proud of what they're doing and extremely happy to have them on board as a supporter of the show. So once again, patreon.com/banjopodcast. Become a supporter of the show yourself and receive amazing rewards in return. In other news, a lot of you might know that I am currently playing with a Michigan-based group called Wilson Thicket. Well, we just put out our debut studio recording. It's an EP titled Off the Edges. So anyone who wants to deal with a little more of me, but in the form of my banjo playing, please go check out the Wilson Thicket EP. You can stream that on all the regular streaming sites, or if you would like to pick up a digital or hard copy yourself, go to wilsonthicket.bandcamp.com and see what that's all about. It's some really good stuff. I'm really proud of it, and hope you like it. And you will be hearing more about that in the near future. And it might be a little too late to receive in time for the holidays, but don't forget to spend all that Christmas money that you get on some official Picky Fingers podcast merchandise. We have t-shirts, hats, hoodies, stickers, theme music for sale, banjo tablature. That's all available over at banjopodcast.com. I just restocked the shop with some fresh new colors of t-shirts available in all sizes. So check those out. Other than that, ways to support the show, make sure you are giving a subscribe and like and a follow on all the social medias, or email the show at pickyfingersbanjopodcast@gmail.com. Today we have a freshly picked episode all about a new album titled Excelsior by banjo legend Alan Munde. Alan is, of course, an endless source of inspiration, not only through his music, but also just has a really cool way of explaining his perspectives about music itself. So it was great digging into these tracks with him and hearing how his brain works and how he comes up with some of these tunes and his approaches for the recording. I will apologize in advance. We had a little bit of technical difficulty getting Alan's voice recorded. So even though the audio quality might not be quite up to my pristine standards, I think Alan's stories and wisdom come through loud and clear. And of course, anytime you have a chance to have Alan Munde on your podcast, you make it work out however you can. So without further ado, give a warm Picky Fingers welcome to Alan Munde talking about his new album, Excelsior. All right, Alan. Well, we're here to discuss your new album called Excelsior. So, first of all, thanks for joining me, and thanks for hitting me up and arranging the interview. It's always a pleasure to see you and hear from you.
Oh, it's my great pleasure to be here with you and talk to all your banjo audience out there, banjo playing audience out there. This is really great.
Playing or loving or whatever. It's all good. Yeah. So I guess, first of all, just give us an introduction to the project. There's a lot of tunes here with a lot of different collaborators. Did you have a specific goal in mind as you put these tunes together, or how did this all come about?
Oh, as with many things, it sort of grows as you get into something. But I'm great buddies with a really wonderful mandolin player named Billy Bright, who lives in Wimberley, Texas, where I used to live. I'm now in Springfield, Missouri. And we had done 2 projects together that were mandolin banjo focused. And I was wanting to do yet a third one. But then as we got into it, it sort of grew. And I had this idea of, rather than just Billy and I, Billy being the other mandolin player, that I've always loved the mandolin, the sound of the mandolin with the banjo. I'm a big fan of the early Dillards with Dean Webb on mandolin and Doug Dillard on banjo. I just love the sound and what they did together. And not that I've ever been able to accomplish that, but I like the sound of 2 picked instruments. It just makes, to me, a really exciting, churning kind of presentation of the music, rather than, a lot of people like banjo and fiddle, which I do too. But the fiddle has got a different attack than the banjo, which is plucked as the mandolin is plucked. And so I thought, well, I've been a part of many workshops that had these fabulous mandolin players that I've admired for many years. And I thought, well, it'd be a chance to bring them in. And I got Billy on board as not only a player, but now he's the producer of it. So Billy Bright was a very large part of this whole project. And again, and a lot of people went through sort of a COVID experience where they, were sitting around. And so I sat around and played and had a tune or 2 that developed. And then it reminded me that I had some tunes that I'd written in the past that I always liked, but never had a opportunity to do it because they were sort of a little different and maybe too different. I don't know. So I collected them all. And then I have a really good friend, Elliot Rogers, who's a great songwriter, but he's also a great tunesmith. And he had a couple of instrumentals that I was enjoying playing and had a different approach than what my tunes were. So it's just a sort of a collection over time of these ideas, but it's somewhat focused around the banjo and the mandolin, although there are other elements in there. That's the main focus of it. And I'll mention one other quick thing is, as with Billy, the focus is so much on banjo and mandolin, and in this case, somewhat of a band sound. We didn't use a guitar except on 3 pieces.
Right.
And that's mostly was my doing. And it's not that I don't like guitar. I love it. I play the guitar. But as a band sound, sometimes the guitar can mask the quality of other instruments. So I left the guitar off. And sure enough, I believe, to my ear, it gives a little more transparency into the banjo and the mandolin sound. We did use a bass. So many of them are just some grouping of mandolin with banjo and bass. Some are just banjo and mandolin. And then there are 3 that all feature a full band. I'll say that by adding the guitar and a fiddle. So, it's got a variety of contexts, I'll say, which is interesting to me, certainly. And I like to call the mandolin, banjo, whatever the combination of mandolin or mandolins is with banjo and bass. I call that the bright monoton sound. So as I'm trying to somewhat facetiously push this idea of this, that there's this sound.
Yeah.
It's basically guitarless. And, in Country Gazette, for a period of time, it was Roland White on mandolin, me on the banjo, a bass player like Billy Joe Foster, and then Gene Wooten on the dobro. And we would play like that. So there's no guitar.
Wow.
The dobro is a guitar-like instrument, but it's not the same. And I remember playing at the Birchmere in D.C., which is a big showcase for bluegrass bands. And during the break, somebody came up to me and said, because we'd come out and play 4 songs just right in a row, and none of them featured the guitar. And then maybe Gene would put the dobro down and pick up a guitar. And somebody said, man, I didn't even realize there wasn't a guitar there until you picked one up.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of music, and for me as a banjo player in that context, it's easier to play because the guitar, I love the guitar, but it swallows up sonically, sort of the range that the banjo is in and the mandolin lower range is in. And, so it kind of, if you're not real careful with it and it's not played carefully, I'll say, it can kind of it puts a shadow over all the other instruments.
I think I know what you mean. Yeah.
And I'll probably get a few emails from guitar players who don't agree. And I love the guitar, so I'm just saying, for me, it's kind of a thing I did on this recording.
Hey, there are a lot of well-loved bluegrass albums by Tony Rice and Chrisman that don't have a banjo. So this is us getting our revenge, right?
You got it.
There we go.
No.
Now, I'll admit that I had to look up the meaning of the word Excelsior. So I'm wondering what significance did that word have for you that you wanted to name the project after it?
Well, this goes to me. I went to a parochial school and we're taught by nuns, and we had to memorize poems. And one of them was a poem called Excelsior, and it's by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow.
Okay.
And I've just always remembered it from youth. And I like sort of the exoticness of the word, but it's Latin for higher, I think, or ever upward, I'll say. And in this poem, it's about a mountain climber who runs into all sorts of weather and bad things, but in the end, he's always Excelsior, so it's just life's things that they throw at you as you're climbing the mountain, chant or use the word Excelsior, and it just is an encouragement to reach higher. So that's kind of that. It's mostly because it's an exotic sounding word. Also, I looked it up, and there already is an Excelsior hornpipe, which is what I wanted to call it. So to differentiate mine from the traditional one, I call it Longfellow's Excelsior hornpipe because he was the poet.
Yeah.
So it's just a thing.
There's also a little bit of a naming convention in bluegrass of like Garfield's Blackberry Blossom and sort of distinguishing things using that method. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And that I'm drawing upon that tradition.
I guess with that's a perfect lead in to the first track, which of course is Longfellow's Excelsior Hornpipe. You've already explained sort of where that title came from. I guess I'd like to talk about the process of arranging this one. I mean, the most noticeable feature is that you have the double mandolins. They seem to go in and out of different harmony parts, sometimes unison melodies, sometimes tremolo. How did this arrangement come about? It's really interesting arrangement-wise.
Well, here's Billy Bright. This is Billy Bright again, just listening to it and seeing how it feels to him. To me, it's interesting, and it's sort of a statement on my part that going back to the Dillards and Dean Webb and Doug Dillard, and the Dillards in general. Their very first album was called Back Porch Bluegrass. And when you put the needle down on the record, the very first thing you hear is the mandolin. And so on this recording, when you do that, if you were to put a needle down on it, it wouldn't work. But when you push play, and if you play it in order, the first thing you hear is the mandolin playing the melody. Now, here's another element of it is I've always thought, and am happy when it works out this way, but you write melodies on the banjo, and you take Volume Out and Breakdown and Flint Hill Special and all those, there's not really a fiddle melody. There's not really a melody that the fiddle player would glom onto. They just make up whatever they want. So I always had the idea of trying to create things on the banjo that were actually musical in the sense that they translated to other instruments well enough that they could be played on another instrument and it'd be the same tune. So this Excelsior hornpipe, Kim Warner is a mandolin player from Australia and brilliant, and was around the Austin area and played with a group called the Green Cards and had great success. But he was able to learn it and make it work on the mandolin, as Billy Bright did also, because it's a melody. It's not banjo sounds, and I'm cool with banjo sounds too. I love it, but I like the idea of a melody. So I was real pleased, just on a personal level, that it could be played with some ease. Of course, these two guys are really good players, by both Kim and Billy. And Kim worked up a harmony part all on his own. Billy may have asked him to do that. Billy had a hand in all of this. And he would listen to it and request certain things. And he wanted the tremolo back up. And really what I do on the banjo is the mandolin enters playing the melody. I play back up to him until then it goes through the melody a second time. And the second and third time I'm playing the melody on the banjo. And there's a mandolin playing unison with me, and also mandolin playing rhythm. And then the last time, Billy and I are playing the melody in unison, and Kim Warner is playing, and I'm going to call it conversational mandolin. He's playing in response, and these are the instructions. It's just that, Kim, at this part, just play as if you're having a conversation and respond to what you're hearing. And was incredibly beautiful. And I wish I could put out just all the tracks of his responses that we didn't use.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was, just tremendously talkative, I'll say. But anyway, that's what we wound up with. So it's just basically the statement of the melody three times with, the mandolins doing different things to create a difference, even though the melody is just the melody every time.
Yeah, I love how that's, I guess I'd call it maybe almost like a John Hartford-esque approach, where it never really falls into like rhythm section soloist. It's this evolving mishmash of some combination of the melody, some harmony, some, like you said, some fills that right. Respond to them.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It's so that's what the essence of that tune is. And also I want to mention for the banjo players, I'm going to call it's a melodic approach, the Bill Keith-ish. I refer to it as string crossing, where you're getting different notes on different strings. No two notes in a row are on the same string. And also I do something, it's very tiny in this particular one, but that I do quite often because it feels good to my hand to do it, is they're pull-offs. Rather than picking a note, one of the eighth notes, you do a pull-off to get a note that you want. And it just feels cadence-wise in my hand a little better. So it's got that element to it, but it's in the key of F. And so for melodic tunes, it's a little, different than the key of G or D or C,
right.
Which are more common, where F is a little different. And so that's one little difference about it, I think.
Yeah, and another difference that I think is actually somewhat common in your compositions, you tend to straddle this like major minor tonalities, like maybe sometimes throwing in I don't know if I haven't learned the piece, but I think it's probably like a flat seventh or a major seventh at different points.
Yeah, it's in the key of F, and I should mention the banjo is tuned standard tuning, G tuning. So when I said it's in F, it's not with a capo or anything. It's just straight ahead. And cool. It goes through lots of 1/6 changes, like F to D minor and B flat to G minor. So it's the 6 minor of each one of those chords that goes through from time to time. Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting. Next, we have Lloyds of Lubbock, which this is educational for me. I had to look this one up, and it looks like it's from like an Odd Couple bit about a sketchy insurance company. Is that where this comes from?
Oh, I have a good friend when I lived in West Texas. I lived in Levelland, and Lubbock is just down the road. And there was a family of musicians there, the Maines brothers. And Lloyd was the steel player. And Lloyd is the father of Natalie Maines.
Right.
With now called the Chicks. The Chicks. Yeah. And she's the lead singer and sang Wide Open Spaces, and I guess is the lead singer on most of their material. But that's Lloyd's daughter, and Lloyd's a fantastic steel player and a very, very good friend and a music producer. He now lives in Austin. And I wrote this tune, and this is kind of different on the banjo too, because it's in the key of E. The only thing different, E open, with the fifth string at a B note.
Okay.
So once again, it's a melodic approach, somewhat, largely the A part especially, which is kind of just a blues thing. But as I was playing it sounded to me like the idea a steel guitar player might come up with. Where they have all those tunings and they push pedals and it gets this array of notes that are seemingly not commonly played together, I'll say. So when you play this Lloyds of Lubbock, you're playing fingering things up the neck, but you're using open strings in comparison to them. And you get this, to me, it's a different kind of sound. It's not wildly different, but just like, what is that kind of a sound? So I asked him if he would play on it, and he said he would. And so I called it, Lloyds of London is the insurance company.
Okay.
Insurance company, but I just called it Lloyds of Lubbock. So as a somewhat of a humorous tribute to Lloyd.
Okay, well, maybe you didn't know this, but there's a... when you Google it, there's an old Odd Couple television show that pops up where there's a Lloyds of Lubbock insurance company, and he's like this sketchy, shady guy I don't know. Check it out. I figured that's where it came from, but
oh no, I'm totally unaware of that. But that's really cool. I hope I don't get sued or anything.
Yeah. I won't tell if you don't. Yeah.
Right. And so, to me, it's a real interesting tune, and I like it. And I will say one thing that's a little different for me about it is the more you play, I'm going to use the word mature. You mature a little bit. And I'm a real late bloomer.
Sorry for the interruption, folks. We'll be right back with the rest of the episode in just a few moments, but I had to take this opportunity to tell you about some of the sponsors of Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast. The first one up is Elderly Instruments. I always tell people how Elderly is the world's most trusted source for new, used, and vintage stringed instruments of all kind. They're the first place I go for all my banjo needs, and also, by the way, any guitar, violin, ukulele, mandolin needs you have, they're going to have all of that. But you don't need to take my word for it anymore, folks. Elderly Instruments was just named the best small business in the country by the United States Chamber of Commerce. So first of all, congratulations to Stan Werbin, Lillian Werbin, and all the rest of the Elderly family for that remarkable award. And second of all, I encourage you all to go see what the fuss is about. Either get into the showroom in Lansing, Michigan, or visit them online at elderly.com. They have the entire inventory up there. They ship worldwide, and they have that great customer service that wins folks awards. And they're just a phone call away if you ever need any advice on any of those products. So once again, elderly.com, or call them at 517-372-7880. The Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast is also sponsored by our good friends over at Peghead Nation. Peghead Nation is the nation's #1 site for streaming video courses in banjo, guitar, mandolin, fiddle, dobro, upright bass, and ukulele, where you can learn bluegrass, old time, and many other styles from some of the most talented players and instructors in all of roots music. Here is some of the selections, and this is just the banjo stuff. You can take beginning banjo with Bill Evans, bluegrass banjo with Bill Evans, clawhammer banjo with Evie Layden, Wade Ward style banjo with Bruce Molsky, the banjo according to Danny Barnes, or contemporary bluegrass banjo with Wes Corbett. Now, no matter what course you select, it's going to come with high-quality multi-angle video lessons, downloadable notation and tablature, play-along tracks, and plenty of tunes and songs to play. And perhaps best of all, Picky Fingers listeners get a month free by entering coupon code PICKYFINGERS, all one word, all lowercase, at checkout. So once more, go to pegheadnation.com and enter Picky Fingers at checkout to get your first month free. The Picky Fingers podcast is also brought to you by Sullivan Banjos. Now, I'm very familiar with Sullivan Banjos. I've been playing one for nearly 20 years. I get tons of compliments on that banjo's sound, and that's really no surprise because the Sullivan name has been synonymous with incredible banjo workmanship and tone for decades. So whether you are looking for a pre-war style traditional design on through the craziest custom design you can think of, Eric Sullivan is here for you to make your dreams a reality. So get in touch with him over at sullivanbanjo.com, email him at sullivanbanjo@gmail.com, or sometimes the best way is just the old-fashioned way. Give him a call at 502-365-5022. And don't forget to tell him that Keith at the Picky Fingers podcast sent you.
So you write a tune and it's got an A part and a B part. Well, there's nothing, and this comes up later in another tune, but there's nothing that says it has to always be A and the same B.
Mm-hmm.
So the second time I play through the B part, I've changed it so that the B parts are different and not wildly or crazy or anything, but there's just a difference. And I at first I thought, well, you can't do that. You're not supposed to do that because it makes it harder. Not harder, but you have to pay more attention.
Just confusing, yeah.
Yeah, it could be. But I left it anyway because, hell, I want to make music. I've decided, it's better to make music than it is to always follow a form. And I remember reading John Coltrane one time. It was a story about him playing at a club in New York City. And the opening act, I'll say, was John Lee Hooker. Or,
oh, wow.
Or Lightning Hopkins or some solo blues artist.
Yeah.
And he said he was off to the side with a bandmate listening. And the bandmate was sort of poking fun at John Lee Hooker or Lightning Hopkins, whoever it was, that he would just go to a 5-chord whenever, at odd times.
Uh-huh.
Well, what Coltrane said about it was he thought it was cool because he said the content is more important than the form.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really good. A good thing to notice. And so in this sense, the content was more important than the form to me. And so I made the second B part for me different.
Yeah. It almost sounds like a C part when you hear it.
Yeah. I think of it as just an alternate B part. But You're right. It kind of is. So anyway.
Yeah. Very cool. Blue Hole Stroll. Now here's a beautiful chord melody style arrangement. And I feel like as I've seen you play over the years, it seems like your style kind of grows more and more in this direction. It strikes me that this is probably what you enjoy working on in your personal time. Is there any accuracy to that?
Oh, definitely. I love harmonies and all these sorts of things. And one thing that's interesting on the banjo is, we only have 3 fingers. Basically, that's what we use, thumb, index, and middle. So when you play a chord, you can drag your thumb and get another string, but most of the time you're just playing 3 notes. So the intrigue of trying to make 3 notes more interesting somehow, there's a certain intrigue for me in that. So I like sort of chord solos and then try to get kind of different little harmonic sounds along the way. And also, the older I get, the less I can play as fast as I once did. And so slow songs, all of a sudden, very appealing.
Yeah. Now, give us a quick banjo lesson, either via demonstrations or just by explaining. How do you go about composing in this style? Does it start as a single note melody and you fill it in from there? Or what does that look like when you're coming up with this stuff?
Well, this particular tune, the chord progression, the flow of it is a well-known form for the most part. And I don't know, it's sort of like Some Old Day or I Don't Love Nobody, that sort of chord progression. Mm-hmm. And then you just look along the trail for little ways to make that a little different. This is in the key of C. Okay, so if I wanted to go C and ultimately go to F in a progression, well, I would travel this way for me, just in this tune, with C, G 7th augmented, A minor, E augmented, and then here's the F. And then F sharp diminished. So back to C. So it's that idea.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and you just kind of start with it. And I'm a believer in Jens Kruger. I saw Jens Kruger at a workshop, and I saw Bill Emerson, and they both said the same thing differently. And Jens Kruger said, what musicians do is they play a note, then they ask the question, what comes next? Mm-hmm. And Bill Emerson, somebody asked him how he wrote tunes, and he said, well, I'm sitting around watching TV or just playing, and I'll use the word goofing off, although I don't like that, messing around, and I'll come up with something, and then I'll ask myself, well, what goes with that? So it's, that sort of an approach. So you play a little bit, and it reminds you of other things or new things, and you just start adding things into it until you type the words "the end." And so you're, you just follow where it goes. And I want to say one other quick thing about me, if I can.
Of course.
About banjo playing. The way I look at it, my life and banjo is I'm a banjo player trying to play music. And I think the other side of the coin is a musician who plays the banjo. I'm a banjo player who plays music. Then there's a musician who plays the banjo. And right. I would say, I could name names, but I'm just going to talk about me. So what I do is I kind of look for what the banjo has to offer and then go with that, rather than, I've got this melody and I'm going to, for me, I would say, force it onto the banjo. And you hear not so much. There's such brilliant players nowadays. You don't hear it so much, but there was a time when you would hear kind of things to me seem forced rather than, and written sort of counter to the banjo.
Yeah.
Or against the banjo. Where for me, if the banjo doesn't kind of give it to me fairly easily, I don't go there, because I'm a banjo player. And so if I move my fingers a certain way and music, what I identify as music comes out, then I go with it. But if it's too hard or, I'm just being too sort of clever, that's not going to work. So anyway, the second part, if I could talk about the B part of this tune, somebody told me long, long time ago, there is no song that goes all the way around the circle of fifths. And I believe them. I think there's a jazz tune, old big band tune called Cherokee, that the B part goes just through the circle of fifths. So I was intrigued by that. And I like the idea of the circle of fifths because it makes things sound good. So I did that in the B part. Here it is. Let me show you what I'm talking about. That's just G to C. G. Then it does this. I'm in C. It goes to B. E minor. A to D. G to C, F to B flat, E flat to A flat. So it just goes around the circle of fifths.
And it keeps going after that? It goes all the way through?
No. I bailed that. It goes from A flat to which, and you have to, I'm making all this up. This is my understanding of music theory. It's somebody could probably say the words that it would explain it. But A flat is very close to a D7th, altered D7th kind of chord. So you can go from A flat to a D7th, which puts you back at G. And then you're back at C.
Okay.
So
yeah,
it's that idea. It's a fun thing to do. I do it actually in another piece on this recording, but that explains that Blue Hole Stroll. And Blue Hole is a swimming hole in Wimberley, Texas, and a regional park down there. And my wife and I used to walk it a lot, and it seemed, like an easygoing, strolling kind of a tune. So I called it Blue Hole Stroll, and hole and stroll rhyme. So I thought, well, that sounds poetic. So
yeah, that's the theme for this one.
Yeah.
And that circle of fifths portion, is that over the double banjo, the banjo duet breakdown thing?
I do it in that. Yeah, I do it in. It actually is when I'm playing solo, the single banjo, it's the B part. When I do the two banjos, it's just the second banjo is in harmony, does the same. It's the circle of fifths again. Yeah, this is a tune that is the same every time.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yep, love it.
And now Miss Kitty's hornpipe, this one is definitely a little more of, I think, what a lot of people would identify as like a vintage Alan Munde sounding melodic style banjo piece. You already talked about your choices of instrumentation. Yeah, a lot of these are either solo banjo or duets or very stripped down. Is it pretty much just what you already said, that you wanted to be able to hear the instruments?
I like the sound of just the banjo and the mandolin. I like to hear, it gives people a chance to hear what they sound like in a different context. I mean, not a wildly different, but just, a different view of both the mandolin and the banjo. And Emery Lester is the mandolin player that plays on this one, who's a brilliant. All these guys and gals that played on this are brilliant. And he's just a really beautifully clean and sparklingly clear player. And I've played with him many times in Europe and at workshops and whatnot. And he did a great job on it, I think. And again, it's a tune that I hoped would translate to the mandolin as a musical piece and not just play solos over the chords. And he certainly did that, and plus he played a solo and played in unison with me. He did all of that stuff. And when I would contact these players, just a minimal instruction. I'd say, play the melody if you like it, play harmony if you want, or just play whatever you think it sounds like to you, and just turn it loose. And I'm a believer in you get good people and you just tell them play like you play, and they're very, very sensitive listeners and great. They know how to fit in. And one thing about when you're playing in this format is everything is sort of, I'll say, use the word visible. There's no hiding behind anything. So in a sense, you have to listen very closely and play in a way that's exposed. So, and all these people are really, really good at it, and I love it. I'm also on this Miss Kitty's hornpipe. I played a festival in Minnesota, and there was a group there called the Tune Junkies, and their mission was there were three of them. It was a trio. They just played tunes that they liked, and if you didn't like it, then maybe you'll like the next group. But I found it really compellingly attractive, just for musicians to sit down and play. Here's the tunes we love to play. Maybe you'll like to listen to them, but this is when we get together, this is what we play. And they played a tune in there called the Missouri Hornpipe, I think it was. And I'm not saying this is modeled after that, but it's sort of inspired by that tune. And I just did what I could do in there to make it sound hornpipe-ish. And I'm not even sure what that is, to be honest with you. But it seems to come out sounding that way.
Yeah, cool. Then we have Hymn for Slim, which I'm assuming is named for Slim Ritchie. Is that a fair assumption there?
Absolutely. I met Slim. He was called David Michael Ritchie, Mike Ritchie. I'm from Norman, Oklahoma. And at the age 14, I got a guitar and looked in the yellow pages and found the closest music store, which was Mike Ritchie's Guitar Center. And went over there, and Mike Ritchie's Guitar Center is where I went for my first sort of guitar lessons. I had already figured out D, G, and C, or D, G, and A7, and tried to play a few tunes that way, but went there to take lessons and knew Mike. Later, he became Slim Ritchie from then on till his death, maybe in 2015. And we were great buddies, and he was a mentor, a musical mentor to me. And he also owned Ridge Runner Records, which released Banjo Sandwich and several my solo albums and some Country Gazette and different artists. But he was really important in my musical career. So I wanted to just pay a little tribute to him in a kind of a somber way. So I wrote that tune there, and it's what it is. It's a solo banjo piece.
Is the banjo in a different tuning for this?
That's a good question, because it's not.
Okay.
It's all gotten out of the standard tuning, and I don't think I played the fifth string at all in it. So I don't even think I fooled with retuning it or anything. So it's all played just on the 4 harmony strings, I'll call them. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of sort of was unusual for me to do this kind of a piece. And not with, I'm going to say it's sort of a classical kind of sounding thing, but I don't know anything about classical music as a study. You know, I know what it sounds like when I...
Yeah.
But I've never studied that, but it seemed somewhat classical, and it had a certain sense about it that was that way. And so anyway, yes, it was for Slim, my good friend Slim Ritchie.
Are you familiar with the banjo player Rex McGee?
I sure am. I've met him in a time or two.
I think that's why I wondered if it was in a different tuning, is because he uses a fourths tuning, and there was some things in this piece that kind of reminded me of stuff that I've heard him do, and I don't know, it just kind of made sense in my mind.
No, that's a good question.
And then I think the part that really grabbed my ear, I mean, you said it was maybe classically sounding, but there's a part where it's almost Travis style with like an alternating bass, but a higher up the neck melody.
Right. I think I know what you're talking about. And it's mostly just done out of a chord shape. Let's say it starts on A minor. The A minor chord is on the interior string, second, third, and fourth. And then that high note is a note one half step out of the chord on the first string. So it'd be A minor with a B note on top, you know, so you get actually an A minor ninth, I guess it would be.
Right.
And here, I'll demonstrate it here real quickly.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Let's see. That little thing there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a A minor. I don't know if you can.
Yeah. Cool.
Then it goes to there.
Yeah.
And you might ask, how did you decide on those chords? I mean, that particular, you know, actually what I did is, and again, I mentioned Jens Kruger and Bill Emerson, but I want to mention Tony Trischka. Tony's comment one time was to his encouragement was play anything. And so you put your fingers down and you make a sound. And then you keep your fingers the same shape and you move it till you find another place that sounds good. Interesting.
Yeah.
The more you listen to music, the more you start to recognize, well, they sound a reasonable interval between those two to my ear. And so you keep looking for that and you come up with what I did. Each one of those shapes or those chord senses are all the same shape, but just moved to a location that I like the sound of.
Yeah.
And it sounded reasonable and musical to me. So thank you, Tony Trischka.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And moving on, we have another dedication piece, Byron's Buddies, with you and Sam.
Byron Berline died here a couple years ago to the great disappointment of many, including me. And Byron was a great buddy of mine from our college days together. We went to the University of Oklahoma together, and Byron introduced me to a lot of people and a lot of music making and things that I would have taken me another 20 years or more to accumulate all that I got through Byron. Byron was a great conduit of music in my life. Not only his playing, but all the people he knew and the people that brought music to him and he would share with me. So it was really great. And we played in a band together, Country Gazette, for several years. And I'd go visit him at his store in Oklahoma in his later life, and we'd play music when I'd go there, and we'd pick a tune or two and whatnot. But anyway, it was a real, sad moment when he died. So I wrote this tune that, for me, Byron, my favorite Byron is as a fiddle player. And I would go to contests with him. Texas and Oklahoma was full of fiddle contests back in the 60s. So I wrote this tune, especially the A part and the C part, to sound like a Texas-style contest fiddle tune as much as I could on the banjo. And then the B part is just sort of my own takeoff, whatever that might be. But anyway, it's all for Byron. And I thought Sam Bush would be a great one on there because he absolutely knew Byron from when he knew Byron before I did.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he had met Byron at the a big Weezer contest in Weezer, Idaho, National Fiddle Contest in Weezer, Idaho. And both Byron won his division and Sam won his division. So they were aware of each other and were big buddies once again, their whole lives, as long as it could be. And but Sam also was a great fiddle player and a fiddle player that understood exactly the sort of Texas contest fiddle style. So I knew he would do a good job on that recording, and he certainly did. And the only thing I asked him to do was to, on the A part, play a rhythm line like a Texas contest backup guitarist would do. So he would play, and he did it. So I'm really happy that he did that, and it sounds pretty cool to me. And the mandolin on there sounds, if you've ever heard Sam Bush play, it sounds exactly like Sam Bush.
Yeah, that's just right. Yeah.
You don't go, that's not Matt Flinner, is it? No.
Yeah.
that's not Sierra Hull, is it? No.
Yeah.
It's
Unmistakable.
Unmistakable, yes. And brilliant. So I loved it.
Now, I'm curious. You say that you wrote the A part in kind of a Texas fiddle style. What are the elements of that style to you? How is that different than any other piece you might write?
Oh, in a way, not much, but it's more notey. In a sense, what I wrote is not Sally Johnson, but it's Sally Johnson-esque. And it uses, like a lot of tunes, uses the same notes, but you put them in a different order and it's a different tune.
Okay.
There's a certain element, if I could demonstrate it, on the Texas fiddle tunes. It seemed to me at the end of, I'll say bluegrass fiddle tunes, they end on the downbeat of the last measure, let's say, or even at the middle. But these Texas players have a way of kind of, I'll use the word unching the end over just a tiny bit. I'll kind of demonstrate it here. Hang on.
Okay.
So here's G. Let's see. See how it does instead of going. It goes.
Right.
Let's see.
Yeah.
It's got a
Yeah.
Rather than it goes
Yeah. I hear exactly what you mean. Yeah.
I mean, it's a tiny little thing, but it makes it interesting, in a way that to me is the sort of Texas sort of thing.
Gotcha. Next up, we have Holler Up, a Possum, which is one of the tunes that you mentioned is written by your friend Elliot Rogers, who wrote 2 pieces on this album. And I'm not personally familiar with Elliot, so maybe this is a good opportunity to introduce him to listeners and tell me about who he is.
Right. Elliot is a really wonderful songwriter and music maker who lives now in actually Driftwood, Texas, but it's very near Wimberley. But he's from Albuquerque. Okay. Mostly, and played in a group out there with, you might know the name Wayne Shrubsall, who wrote for a Banjo newsletter for many years. They had a group out there together, and he moved down to the Austin area, and we played in a group together. For a while, I had a group called the Alan Munde Gazette, and we recorded an album's worth of music, of which we did a number of Elliot songs. But he's still down in that area and plays music a lot. But he wrote this guitar tune called Holler Up, a Possum. And I thought, as I played it on the banjo, it felt really good to me and kind of different. Not different as a tune necessarily, but different for me to play. It had a little different sensibility about it. And so I took it and played it as the banjo tune, and Elliot plays the guitar on it and the solo. And I really love his guitar playing and the sound of his guitar. It's really, I'll use it, muscular is the word I would use. It's very strong. And then he wrote the other one, which is called Five Fall Down, which is actually a song. It's got words, but he never finished it. But I always liked the flow of it, so I snatched it up made it into sort of a banjo tune. It's kind of an old-timey sound to it, I think, personally. But those are both Elliot songs, and so I had Elliot play on them. And Billy is on the mandolin. Billy's a great mandolin player. One thing I really like about these mandolin players that I've chosen, but also how we recorded them, is once again, without the guitar, you can hear the mandolin chop, but it doesn't. I'm not complaining about anybody else's or anything, but there's a way of playing the mandolin that sounds almost like a cardboard box in its rhythm. It's yeah. You could almost make it with your mouth, and you have that rhythm. Where
Or you don't have to you don't have to actually finger the chords. You can just mute the strings
Right.
and
Absolutely. Where these, because there's not all this competition, you can hear the tone of the chord and the tone of the mandolin in the chop. And, Bill Monroe did that, and I really like that, so it's just that. But Billy was really, and maybe I use the word woof, not WOLF, but WUF, woof. You can hear the sort of the puff of the chop. So anyway, that's Holler Up a Possum, and the name is just bluegrassers, and some of them are always intrigued with old-timey tunes, and there's one called Carve That Possum to Its Heart.
Oof.
That's an Uncle Dave Macon tune, I think. So Holler Up a Possum is just a sort of silly hillbilly-ish.
Just word play.
Yeah. It's just a thing.
Yeah, I was scared to ask.
Yeah, it has no secret meaning.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think I wanted to ask you something about bow nose.
All right.
The thing I'm curious about on this, it's a small thing, but it's definitely noticeable. The first note on the downbeat of the melody sounds like you hit a note and then you slide up to the same note, which I assume you're hitting on like a lower string at that point.
I'm glad.
And then at some point you even play it with a little more of a melodic style thing to it. So yeah, take us through that.
I tried real hard to get it to come out like I wanted, and it did. I mean, that it is sort of unidentifiable is kind of what I was after, but it's actually this. The slide happens on the second string, and it's actually from a G to an A.
Okay.
And let me see how the tune even goes. Man, I can't remember. Oh, there it is. So I hit the fifth string right after it.
Oh, okay. That's it.
The first one is G to an A. Man, I can't remember how to play it right this time. But, that's a really bizarre tune. And for me, I mean, all of this I'm saying is in the context of me, because for the rest of the world, they can do things that I can't possibly do, and they can do things I can do immediately. But for me, in my world, that tune is kind of an awkward, odd-sounding tune. And I did it with Jeremy Chapman as the mandolin player. Jeremy is with the Chapman family, who live here in Springfield and have a music store, the Acoustic Shop here in Springfield. Beautiful, beautiful shop. Great players, the whole family. The dad, really fine banjo player. And I got him to play on it. And I said, Jeremy, I can't help you with this. You're just going to have to listen to it. I said, I can't tell you what the chords are on the A part. I have no idea. You just play whatever your favorite sounding chords are with it. The B part and the C part I had a little more of an idea, but the A part is just sort of chordless. You could play it all G, you could play all G's and F's, and you could probably throw some B flats in there. It doesn't matter. But anyway, it's just a melody that seemed to me and Jeremy did really cool things with it. He would play unison, and then when they're in the middle of the unison part, he'll slide off and be somewhere else. And if you're listening to it with headphones, to me, I think of it as sort of darkly mysterious. And in my world, that's what it would be. But it's a curious tune. I'm glad you noticed that little thing at the very first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, highly recommend people check out the rest of these. You know, we tried to give you a little sneak peek behind the curtain on a few of these, but the rest of them are equally as cool. I would draw everyone's attention also to 10 Cent Breakfast, which has this like kind of crazy Tex-Mex meets Duke Ellington meets Western swing, all with a banjo kind of sound, which is really cool.
Yeah, it is. It's real cool. Also, I always like to mention that this is on the Pawtuxet label.
Yes.
Which is a very fine gentleman out of the Washington, D.C. area, and puts out lots of cool music. And just go to his website and see what he's got to offer. And
before we get too far gone here, I want to make sure everyone knows what banjo were you playing for this recording?
Well, I played. I have a Stelling Crusader. I'm a Stelling guy. For all those small group pieces, I played the Crusader, and on the ones that I recorded 3 tunes. I should say this. Of all those tunes I played, only 3 were recorded with the other musicians around. Everything else was me playing by myself in a room. Every bit of it,
Interesting.
Yeah. And that shows you, to me, how good of listeners all these players were. Is I was unable to react to what they did, so they had to play with what I did, and they did it marvelously, so.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, it's a real tribute to all those other people on the recording, for sure. And then in those 3 that are the studio recordings with the band around, I played the Stelling Staghorn.
Got it.
And don't ask me why, I don't know. I just did.
You were 2 steps ahead of me. I was about to ask that, but now I won't.
There should be a better reason than that, but I think the Stelling is a little easier to finger. The string action, and I thought maybe playing with the band I would be a little pressed, so I wanted something a little easier to play. So
you got to make up a better story about maybe how the antlers mean you're asserting your dominance over the other musicians or something.
Oh, didn't I mention that?
Yeah.
I was about to get to that. Yeah. Can I say one quick thing about you and what you're doing? It's really, really great. I love listening to your podcast. I listened to the one with Tom Adams and Chris Warner about Jimmy Martin World.
Do you have anything to add to it?
No, they were right on. They got it all of it. There's no difference anywhere down the line, I don't think. Bill Emerson and JD both had similar stories,
I bet.
Yeah. I mean, he's Jimmy Martin.
Yeah.
He's not going to be different. He just is.
Yeah. Did you listen to the one? I appreciate the kind words, by the way. That's really flattering to hear from you. But Ben Eldridge gave you a shout out. I don't know if you heard that part.
I heard that one. Yeah, I really appreciate Ben. Ben's a great, great guy and a great player and a good friend that I haven't seen in many, many years. I'm sad about that, but maybe one of these days soon.
Well, I'll at least pass along to him that you said hi, and hopefully sometime. And before we really pull the plug, give us websites. How can someone purchase your album or find any other information about you that is out there?
Yeah, my website is almundesbanjocollege.com. And then Pawtuxet Records, you can look them up. So those are the 2 places to find this album, Excelsior. And I will say, I can only sell a hard copy. The CD, Pawtuxet can sell you a download.
Oh, good to know. Yeah.
And also I have all the tablature is available on my website to this.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess I should, yeah. Go ahead.
So you too can be Alan Munde. Yeah.
All right. We should be so lucky for only $15.99 or something or whatever it is. Yeah.
Right.
And I should also add for a lot of us, our longtime fans of yours, there's also plenty of other tablature for a lot of your other recordings. So those of us who are fans of a lot of your other catalog, that's there too.
Yes. I have a way more than probably I need, but it's all there and ready and waiting. So
it's not about you needing it; it's about us needing it. So thank you for providing all that. It's a huge help for sure.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Alan. Been enjoying listening to the album, and I hope everyone else does too.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you, Keith.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and extra special thanks this episode to Companion Custom Banjos. Chris and Stephanie Sorensen and their team are this episode's Patreon supporters of the show. Head over to patreon.com/banjopodcast to support the show yourself, but also to get that meeting link for tomorrow's VIP lounge. That's December 21st at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Everyone is welcome. Don't have to be signed up to join with that. Buy Picky Fingers merch at banjopodcast.com. Contact the show, pickyfingersbanjopodcast@gmail.com. That's going to do it for me. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your holiday season, and I will see you in the new year.